All right, 6 o'clock on the dot.
What
CliffCentral.com.
is
And
that? What
good
is that
morning.
sound? What is that
What is the
sound you're
what?
making with your What is that sound you're making with your voice right now?
What?
Is that your Thursday morning brrr, that
No, it's
reverb?
I don't know. That's maybe just I woke up like a little while ago. That's probably part of it. And this whole week I've been complaining and bitching and moaning about hay fever, so that could have had an effect too. I don't know. I don't know.
Oh,
Someone said to me
ay,
once.
ay.
Someone said to me once the only thing that's missing in my ability to be really good at radio is that I need to smoke.
Aibo.
Uh, I promise you, there was actual life advice I got from somebody once. I won't mention who it was, but they were like, the only problem with you is you don't smoke, so your voice isn't good enough. I was like, what? I would rather sound like shit than be a cigarette smoker. Thank you very much. So, whatever it is, I'm happy with what it is. That's my
Mm.
contribution this morning. What do you have to say, Pumelele Mashiho?
I'm not a smoker, and I'm glad I'm not a smoker. That's what I have to say. And I'm actually glad less and less people smoke.
I don't know. Yesterday we were talking about this with Aspasia, and both she and Labang and I all decided that actually it seems to us that vaping is the new cool thing for the kids to do. It used to be smoking, and the rebel kids would always smoke, or if your parents didn't smoke, you wanted to just because it was a like middle finger to them. Vaping is the new thing, and it's younger and younger kids.
It,
It happens
vaping
indoors. It happens
is
in
a
cars. It's a big thing.
big problem. Vaping is a
Um,
big problem. It's
yeah.
I think when Kaneko got to high school, we probably had vaping conversations almost every other week because they're like vaping raids, just like the smoking raids that used to happen
Yeah.
at school. There'd be
Right.
vaping raids in the bathrooms and the
Yeah.
boys and the who. It's vaping is a huge problem.
And I think it's way more widespread than we imagine. And some of these vapes are super expensive. And people are, like they literally popping in a vape, smoking the thing till it's finished, and then buying another one the next day. And I think you can get so into it, and you can smoke it anywhere. So people do,
Jeez, that
and
is
it's I
hefty.
don't I don't think I don't think it sounds like it's very good for your lungs. I mean, that's so smoking is
Remember, I used to have dreadlocks. Remember, I used to have dreadlocks, right?
yeah, right,
That was my worst thing about going out clubbing was
right.
the the
The
smell of the
smokers,
smoke
yeah,
in
right,
my hair.
horrible, horrible.
Urgh, urgh. Now you don't have those problems when you go clubbing anymore.
Well, I mean, thanks to
Not
Nkosazana
that I
Dlamini
go
Zuma.
clubbing. Not that I go clubbing a lot. I just want to put
Uh,
it out there. Not that I'm out clubbing on
I was gonna
Thursday
say,
nights and
it doesn't seem
Sunday
to me to be
nights.
yeah, it doesn't seem like the thing that you do every weekend. Once upon a time, maybe. But who do we thank? Who do we thank for that? Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Mm,
Yes.
right.
She was
So,
if you
uh,
think she was
Chris,
bad, if you think she was bad about zolling during the lockdown, she
mhm,
was bad about cigarettes.
smoking, that was her thing. That was her contribution to the world. When she dies one day, I'm going to go to wherever she's buried, and I'm going to light a cigarette for the first time in my life and have a ciggy right over her grave. That's what I'm doing.
Shame, man. Shame, man. Ugh.
Okay, so,
Just-
Congo Chris says, "Rest in peace, the public protector. She isn't dead, but she must go and rest and eat some chips at home and leave us in peace." Remember, that's what somebody said about Ace Magashule and burning in Tlemeza when they were asked on ENCA News. They do these box pops, so they go around the country and they ask people in, random places on the street, like, "What do you think of Ace Magashule's party?" And this one guy goes, "Nah, he must go home and eat some chips and sleep." That's what they
Listen,
said.
my
So,
favorite thing about the whole public protector saga this week has
yeah.
been the the DA will often make like posters of stuff and
Uh,
then they to social media. They have a little poster that says, "Thank you to the comrades, to the ANC comrades for voting with us to get rid of the public protector."
Oh, really?
It's such a it's like it's classic trolling, right? And then
Beautiful.
and then Carl Niehaus retweeted the poster to say, "What a shameful day." And then
Ah,
and, um,
what a
Tony
country we
retweeted. So, like, all these people who are like the supposed RET guys retweeting it to say, "What a shameful day! How terrible!" For
have.
and then yesterday, Figile Mbalula retweeted the poster with a big like across it saying "fake news" or something of that sort.
Oh, really?
It's just like they're in a fucking tailspin. It's hilarious.
So who? I mean, who still is in? Who's obviously in the RET faction? You just mentioned Carl Niehaus.
Who knows? Who knows? We
Do we
don't know. We don't know.
do we not have a list? I mean, like, is there no way we can?
Was there ever a list?
Um, no. I mean, I'd like to see one though, because the great comrade Joseph Stalin, the original comrade of comrades. He always used to say, "Know thine enemy," right? Know your enemy, and he used to make lists. He made lists of all the Mensheviks and all the Trotskyites and the counter revolutionaries, and then he'd put out a
Frantically
list
writing lists.
frantically, and then those lists, obviously, they'd go around and they would take people straight to the camps. What did they call them? The kolkhoz and
the
the sovkhos,
the gulags.
the gulags. That's right.
Did
Sorry
did
for
you
your
see
gulag.
did you see your friend Kim Jong Un in his armored train,
Uh,
bullet train on his way to Moscow?
that's
Do you
right.
think he was sitting in the train writing lists?
Um,
His way-
I think he's always writing lists, and I think wasn't he the one who put his uncle in a cannon and blew him to shreds? He did, right?
that guy. That guy doesn't look real. Every
Oh,
time I see him, I'm just like, he comes out of central casting. There is no way this guy is like, how is this the, the square round face, the hair,
no. He looks
the
like a
chubby
villainous.
sausage fingers? I mean,
Right.
he's like out of central casting. It's like somebody like wrote him wrote a character and then he spent some time putting on the weight so that he also has that like roly poly.
Well, I mean, here he is. Like, here's his train.
Look
Beautiful.
at that. Look at
But
that.
it's
You need a close up. And all the guys out in the front here just making sure that no one throws
um,
a shoe at him.
by the way, his train is bulletproof. Do you know that?
This is the whole thing
Mhm,
bulletproof.
mhm.
And they're out there discussing weapons. They're done
Yeah.
with Putin. So
I would love to have been a fly on the wall in that meeting, wouldn't you? Just to have kinda heard what was going on. What are these guys, what do they prioritize? What are their main talking points? Like, if they go in with a set agenda? They know what they're gonna talk about? Or is it just like let's catch up, let's shoot the breeze, you know? What do they
I
do?
mean, I can't believe that this Kim, hasn't got a like keeping up with the dictator TV show yet. Because wouldn't you so much better than the Kardashians? Like if we could just see what he does from day to
Right.
night. Like, I mean,
Exactly.
I would have loved to just be a fly on the window inside that train. On the way, like all of these minions, all these munchkins that are standing out here outside this train, like what happens to them when they're in the train? Where do they sit? Do they sit near him? Are they allowed to look at him? Are they allowed to talk to him? Do they eat
I
cereal?
you gotta tread on super eggshells when you're around this guy. I don't know why I kept that picture up so long. Um, if you were one of his people, if you're one of his henchmen, even if you're a high-ranking one, in fact, the higher ranking you are, the more likely you are to be just taken out on a whim, right? If you don't,
Yeah.
you displease him because you bring up, I don't know, you bring
You're
up his
chewing your
cousin,
cornflakes too loud.
uh-huh, and then
Do you think they
suddenly
have
he's
cornflakes?
and then he's throwing you under the wheels of his bulletproof train.
Like, like, do they have cornflakes
I'm sure they
on the
do.
train? Or like
This is the funny
crunchies?
thing. This is the funny thing about dictators is they actually live these incredibly um what's the word that we're looking for here? These cushy, um,
Lavish.
lavish lives where they get everything they want. Even if they ban it for their people, they make sure they've got plenty of it. So he famously, this Kim Jong Un, or it could have been his dad. I'm not entirely sure. I don't remember exactly, but he used to love watching South Korean and Japanese movies. And then
This
if he liked the actresses from those
this
movies, he
was
would
the
try to get
dad.
them. It's the dad. He would try to get them abducted from wherever they were in Japan or South Korea or wherever else, and brought to him as like slaves.
This no this is the story. I read this book. I read the book. He actually kidnapped a South Korean director and
Mhm.
actress, like not just a director, but like the most famous director in South Korea because he loved the film so much. And those two had been married to each other, but and she was his muse, and they'd made all these films together, and then the marriage fell apart or whatever. So he kidnapped them separately, kept them. Listen, and then made all these statements that they defected to North Korea, to real
Mhm.
Korea.
Yeah.
Right? And
Correct.
then kept the director, kept him in a prison for like 3 years, and kept her in like a gilded cage in a palace in this language. And then eventually, and they didn't know because he'd kidnapped them separately. So they each didn't know that they were both in the country. And then he brought them together in like, had a huge party and kind of like, ta-da! It is insane. There's a book about it. It's called the Kim Jong Un production. And it's an
Wow.
as told by her. And they eventually, and he forces them to make all these movies. And
Jesus.
how they eventually escape is they concoct a plan, but everywhere they live in this palace, and there's cameras everywhere, and there's
Wow.
microphones. It's like being in Big Brother because he's listening to them the whole time. and
Oh my God.
and they make a plan to go and shoot, and he allows them, right, to go and shoot out and I think they were shooting in not Switzerland, but a European country. And
Mm.
that's how they like concoct this thing to run. And they actually they run, and they run to the American embassy, and that's how they get out.
Jeez. This is like a story from
It's a
behind
true story.
the Iron Curtain in like 1950 something, right? You hear about those people in East Berlin who would try to escape across the wall to West Berlin. And now you're telling
Listen,
me this happened recently. This must have been in
n-
the
it,
in the 80s and 90s.
yeah. So this was in the 70s, I think. Now I have to. I'm gonna find it for you. Let me see if in my
I wanna know
Kindle.
what this movie is. I wanna hear the story. Sounds good.
Uh,
All right. Well, Sanele says, and this is the ugly reality. You wake up this morning and you're wondering what's happening in the world. So Sanele says, I missed the show yesterday because power was gone for 13 hours yesterday. Let that
Yay,
sink in.
yay.
More than half the day. My mom said one day they'll simply never turn it back on again, ever.
Okay,
Mm.
so it's called a Kim Jong Il production, and the writer is Paul Fisher, who it was
Damn.
actually yeah. True story.
Okay.
It's an insane book. Find it, read it. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Okay.
And the fact that what's the most amazing thing about it is that it's all true.
Yeah. Wild. Now, speaking of things being true or not true, Sianda says, did anybody see the Tucker Carlson interview with Larry Sinclair about smoking crack and making sexy time with Obama? So I didn't watch the interview
Neither did
because
I.
who has the time? And frankly, am I that interested in, first of all, Barack Obama's sex life? No. And second of all, I don't. Do you believe anyone? Let me ask you this with all the credulousness I can muster. Do you believe someone who is a meth addict who has missing teeth? Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I think there's a lot of shady stuff. There's a lot of story that is
I
missing
didn't
from the
know
Barack.
he looked like this.
It's bad, hey? It's so bad, Pumi. There's a lot that's missing from Barack Obama's story. You know, there really is. There's a lot of stuff that's very shady. We don't actually know, apart from his own autobiographical, books, and he's written two. Apart from his own input, we know very little about this guy. He's not. It's not all terribly well documented. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist for saying that. You can look this stuff up. You can try to look up as much as you want, but there's this enormous gap in Obama's life where we just don't know anything about him. We know he became an activist at some point, got involved in local politics, and then suddenly, boom, he's a senator, and then suddenly, boom, again, he's a president. And without a doubt, this has been one of the most interesting people in the world. And the backstory it's paltry. There's not a lot going on. We know his mom, originally from Hawaii, I think, and his dad from Kenya. But we're
No,
not.
I think she was like from Kansas and then they moved to Hawaii.
Well, you see, I'm not even sure about these details. And then for a while, he was growing up in Indonesia or something. Anyway, I mean, I don't believe anyone who looks like this guy. I'm sorry. Call me a skeptic, but if you're a meth addict who's been in jail for a long time for all kinds of obviously dumb shit, I'm not going to take you that super seriously. Plus, smoking crack. Now he says that Obama and he had gay sex once, and I'm not sure I take the guy seriously. And even if they did, so what? These days, it's like such a big so what. But the crack, I don't think
Do you think
smoking
they're
crack
gonna
is.
give do you think they're gonna give him a tooth for having come on the Tucker Carlson show? Do you think that's gonna be his reward? Because I
Well,
hope so. I hope they
no,
like have how they have those like extreme makeover shows? I think the guy needs just a
he
tooth.
needs
It
to
doesn't have to be
look.
an extreme makeover. Just that tooth, like just that
mm,
one.
okay, so I don't
So
think Obama smoked crack. Smoking crack is not like a thing that you do randomly and recreationally. Like crack smokers are serious drug addicts, right? Like people don't go, oh, I've never really done any drugs, but the other day I just smoked some crack. Like I just felt like
Lost it
doing
up.
a bit of crack. You hear about people who never do drugs, but then they'll suddenly say, "Oh, I felt like doing." One of my friends offered me a line of coke, and I did it, or I smoked a joint once or twice, or like Bill Clinton said, "I did not inhale, but I did smoke a joint." So, I mean, I believe that about Bill Clinton. I don't think Barack Obama, no matter how crazy and wild his youth or his student days might have been, I don't see him going around
Crack.
smoking a crack pipe. You don't come back from that too. You start smoking a crack pipe, you are down the hole. You have finished. You are that's
Also, because you
like
don't start with the crack, right? Crack is
right.
like a ways down the line. You're smoking other shit, and then
Yeah.
you're at crack.
And I wouldn't would I think any less of anybody because they smoked weed or because they smoked cigarettes or because they did uh, any other kind of drug recreationally, with the possible exception of crack and heroin? I probably wouldn't. So I think it's nonsense. But then there's always this. I mean, you remember Brett Kavanaugh, right? Who's
Mm,
now a
mm.
Supreme Court justice. And you remember people, there was that woman who completely made up the most bullshit story ever about how he was a gang rapist. Remember at Varsity? He was supposed to have been, and you had terrible people like Chelsea Handler and Amy Schumer outside the court saying, rapist, rape, holding up signs that this guy was a rapist. Of course, no evidence was ever brought to bear. There was this one woman with the most sketchy memory available to humanity. And it was perfectly okay for her and for the entire media establishment to brand Kavanaugh a rapist, which is a serious charge, when there was no evidence to that. And they remember there were people who were analyzing her body language, and I mean, she was this bizarre person who just concocted the story to keep another Republican off the Supreme Court. Anyway, if you're going to do that, then it's perfectly okay for Tucker Carlson to interview some dude who has a story about Obama and crack and gay sex. So, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I don't believe any of it. But this is the world we live in now, where people just are allowed to say whatever bullshit they can come up with. Oh, Brett Kavanaugh raped me, or oh, I had gay sex with Obama and we smoked crack together. It's all bullshit. I think it's all just, it shows you how puerile our politics has become. And I don't believe in either case that these people are credible witnesses. So that's my input on that.
You know what I've been thinking a lot about, because there's a lot of it, is I am wondering why now? Why now? Like, I mean, they had 8 years of the man being president. All of this conversation could have been had then. Why now? What does it achieve at this point in time?
Yeah,
Because
well, that's another thing.
it's not going to unravel. It's not going to unravel his presidency. It's not going to,
No.
and you know what I'm saying? It's like, why now?
It's purely it's just shit stirring. It's there's no other way to put it, I don't think. I just think it's dumb. It's the kind of shit that gets in a very old school way, it gets headlines. It makes people look at how people are talking about it in the comments
Here
section. That's
we
why
are.
I know. And it's because it's sensational, and suddenly people are like looking at Obama during his presidency, thinking, so that guy smoked crack and had gay sex with like toothless meth addicts. No, I don't believe it. I think it's completely stupid. Living Sunny says that Obama's brother says he was born in Kenya. Yeah, I've heard these stories too. I don't know. I mean, I really don't know. And you remember how much nonsense there was when Trump, before he was a presidential candidate, he was saying, "Where is Obama's full birth certificate?" You remember that whole thing? It was a thing. Stupid.
It was
What
a thing.
stupid stuff. I mean, really. That, I'm afraid, is the new normal. We too know power for more than half the damn day, says Max Sony. Yeah, we've gone horribly backwards since BRICS. Cyril clearly was whipping them into shape, which he can do, obviously, because for BRICS we didn't have any power failures, remember? And we didn't have any load shedding of a considerable nature. We were at load shedding stage 1 or 2, or didn't get much more above that for the period that all Cyril's big international friends were visiting. And then
So
suddenly
that
we're back to
WhatsApp
stage
group I'm
6.
in.
Yeah.
You know that WhatsApp group I'm in that supposedly has all these people. There's a person on there who is very committed to sending information about the grid.
Oh, yeah.
Very, very committed. And that person's like, also because I don't have these people's numbers. When you're in a WhatsApp group and you don't have people's numbers, so you don't know who they are, what their names are, whatever, unless they've made their profile and it's got a name or whatever. And this person who's so committed to sending information about ESCOM and the grid and the whatever, I suspect is a person that comes from ESCOM.
Oh, really?
Because because
An
when there's
insider.
narrator news, when he's just,
Well, you
and
speak about Narrator news. So there's a story in the news today. The head of Special Investigating Unit, that's the SIU, Andy Motibi, said that despite possible good intentions, former ESCOM CEO Andre de Ruyter made himself guilty of maladministration by authorizing a clandestine investigation into the operations of the power utility. Motibi told Parliament de
they were
Ruyter
at Parliament.
was responsible for his actions that were not in line with his office. So
They were in Parliament, and he said that there's some high profile, including cabinet ministers, names that have come out of the report. And then the chairperson of the committee was like, Watch yourself now.
Oh, again, where are our lists, comrade? Like Stalin
There's
would
a
have been.
list.
See, this is why our government they're not even good at being communists, because remember we had Anthea Jeffrey in not so long ago, and she's written this book about how
Yes.
NDP, and I mean, it's a fascinating book. It's probably one of the best things you could read if you want to understand what's really going on in the ANC. And she was telling us all this stuff about how it's this nefarious plan, and the ANC has got this idea of ruining things because then they can rebuild them their own way, and it's all part of their plan. They're not just bumbling incompetent morons. But then you hear stuff like this, and you realize they can't even do
Write a
communism.
list. Why aren't you giving us a list, people?
Give us
List,
a list.
comrades. A list. Where's
If,
the list,
if
comrades?
they meant business, if Cyril meant business, or anyone else, let's not say Cyril, let's say there's some mastermind, brilliant person somewhere in the operation, somewhere in the ANC's hive mind. There's one person who pulls all the strings or whatever. Then that person would have authorized, we're going to have to get rid of X, Y, and Z. These people are out because they've fucked up ESCOM, and we need ESCOM to work because it's going to cost us votes at the elections or whatever. They would have killed that person. They would have taken those people out. But they didn't, because they're that shit at their jobs. They can't even be evil. Like you said, Kim Jong Un is from Central Casting. He's like this evil mastermind. He's this, he's this
It
Bond
is.
villain looking dude. Our guys don't even come from the cameo casting department. They're not even persuasive as extras. Then if they were starring in a movie, they would be the people behind the extras, just making up the crowd. That's how bad they are at their jobs.
Yeah.
Unreal. It's unreal. Okay, so Hillary Clinton started the birther movement, says Mutande. I don't disbelieve that at all. I mean, Hillary Clinton started the Russia hoax thing with Trump. We know that her campaign paid that guy. What was his name? That fake CIA dude. They were the ones who paid for that whole Russia hoax story, which was there from the moment that Trump became president. And Hillary Clinton I think he's right to have called her crooked. I mean, in the end, it's turning out Trump was right about a lot, because, he came up with the moniker Sleepy Joe, right? And Joe actually fell asleep this week. He actually fell asleep in front of everybody. And I'm like,
What are they going to do? Oh, guys, what are they going to do? What are the Democrats going to do? Because they cannot possibly be thinking of putting Joe Biden up yet again. What
I
are
hope
they
not.
going to do?
But here's what I want to know, because when they played him off, and I don't want to have a rant about Biden again, but when they played him off like an Oscar
Have you had one this week already?
Tuesday in Vietnam, they played him off with jazz music while he was standing. He was still talking, and they started playing music like he was at the Oscars and his speech had gone on too long. And then they usher him off the stage. So he's not calling the shots anyway.
I saw that. I did see
So
that.
bad, man.
I did see that.
Who's
That
really
was
calling? Who's calling those shots? I mean, we talk
that
about
was
how the ANC doesn't have a hive mind or a person who's in charge or whatever. It's just bumble, stumble, fall. And I feel like it's the same in the US. Who's actually making who's the one who said, guys, start playing the music, start playing the music. He's talking shit and he's falling asleep. Come in. We've got to have some music, please. Play some jazz music. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. And then Joe's like, and he's like, he has the music.
carried on talking.
Unbelievable.
It was very hectic. That and the videos of Moscow Mitch kind of glitching in the middle of
Oh my God. It's just unreal. Anyway, and the great
Moscow
news,
Mitch.
the great news of this week for people who really love very old people is that Nancy Pelosi has announced at the ripe old age of 80-something that she, in gratitude, this is how she phrased it. She said, in gratitude to the people of her constituency in San Francisco, in gratitude, she's going to run again. She's going to make herself available in her 80s to be in Congress once more. She's like, I was going to retire. I was going to retire, she says, with her false teeth falling out. She goes, but thanks to the people of my constituency, as dust comes out of her mouth like a fucking mummy. She goes, "I'm going to, in gratitude, run again." And she does. So there we go. Everybody get excited because the gerontocracy is a real thing. It's unbelievable.
Listen, well, maybe she's trying to our very own Mangosuthu.
Shame.
Actually,
Rest in peace.
he made history. He's gone as the oldest serving MP. Died in office. See?
Yep. So there we go. We still got a record. That's nice of you to remind us. We still got a record. Two Brain Cells says, "Are you guys still talking about crack? Because that is what I'm here for."
We're past the crack. We're past the crack. Sorry. You missed that part.
Every time I hear the word crack, I don't think of drugs. I think of that scene in The Nutty Professor where Eddie Murphy is playing all the characters in the Clump family, and I just love that movie. I'm sorry, I'm childish as hell.
Oh my God.
And the grandmother and the father's going, "Yeah, I'm gonna tell you what I think," and he like lets off a big fart, and then the mama goes, "Oh, Cletus, did you have to let that? Well, I can't believe you farted at the dinner table, Cletus." And then the grandmother goes, "Did anybody call my name?" And he goes, "Yeah, I called your name." And then she goes, "Cletus, I'm gonna stick this knife in the crack of your ass." What please? Sorry, I'm an
I
Eddie
don't
Murphy
think I've seen
fan.
that movie.
Oh my God, you're missing out. I mean, like that
No,
and
no,
Scary
no.
Movie. Oh, I'm such a fan.
I've seen parts of it like in passing, but I have never sat down and deliberately pressed start at the beginning of that
No.
film and sat on
Ah,
my couch till the very
because
end of it.
you're watching boring Kim Jong Un shit or Kim Jong Un one. You should be watching The Nutty Professor. You're missing out. That's part of your education, Phumi. I'm sorry. Very embarrassing.
Mm,
Mm.
Okay.
William says, "You remember that far too well." It's because I've watched it so many times. I am a fan of Eddie Murphy till the day I die. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Oh man. I-
Tracy says the best fart scene in a movie while we're being stupid.
oh my God.
From A Million Ways to Die in the West. That's also a great movie. When then they bring up, for example, how like in the old days nobody used to smile in a picture. Smiling in a picture became a thing, I think somewhere in the 50s or 60s, because it never was a thing before then. They always were super, super serious for pictures, right? They were, right, take a picture. And then I remember that movie brought it up, and I was like, yeah, that's such a good point, because they don't. Like, you look at portraits from people anytime before the 1900s.
Yeah, like my
Serious.
not even before the night. There's deep into, I think even deep into maybe like in the 20s, maybe even the 30s.
Yeah. Yeah. Look at all those people who you can't find pictures of anybody pre-World War One who's smiling in a picture. It doesn't happen. Anyway, in Million Ways to
Like
Die in the West, which is such a great movie, when the old man drops a wet fart and says, "Oh, that came out of my penis." Nicholas says, "My brother and I call my sister and her husband the Clumps."
oh no, guys.
Yes.
I don't even want to know why.
Well, it probably looked like the Clumps.
No, no.
Yes. What a great! I can't believe you haven't watched the movie, Phumi. I'm so disappointed in you, really.
It's okay. I'm okay with that.
All right, so Kim Jong Un, since we've been speaking about him a little bit, also in the news, confident Moscow will win a great victory. That was what he said after he had his meeting with Vladimir Putin. He said, "Great victory is on the way for Russia." He's convinced that they are well ahead of Ukraine, and it's going to be over soon, and Russia's going to win. So there's the intel you were missing, my friends. And I don't see any reason not to believe Kim Jong Un. I see him as a totally credible guy, and I would like to believe that he is correct. So forget everything that Phumi and Kanthan and all the various experts that we've had on the Burning Platform have said over the last year or 2 years, because it's been going that long. The Russia-Ukraine war will
Mm.
be over soon, and Russia is going to win. That's Kim Jong Un's contribution to the conversation. They had talks in Vostochny, in the Cosmodrome, in the far east of Russia, as Moscow grew increasingly isolated from the West over its offensive in Ukraine. At least Vladimir Putin can count on true friends like Kim Jong Un.
And true friends, guys, true
True
friends.
friends.
He came
Right.
in his bullet train. You know what? I mean, I have so many questions about that bullet train. Like, how long do you think it took? How long was the train ride from North Korea?
First of all, it's not a bullet train, it's a bulletproof train. It's a normal train. North Korea does not have a bullet train. A bullet train is a Japanese thing, which is fast and super high tech, and the North Korea does not possess high tech anything. Right?
Okay.
All their rockets, though they may have nuclear capability, they don't have a single rocket that hasn't misfired, landed in the ocean on purpose or by mistake, can get far enough to reach anybody of any significance. Their rocket technology is absolutely shit. So I don't believe, and they're spending every extra cent that they have on nuclear rocket technology, and they just can't get it right. So this is not a hugely, I mean, most of their technology is still from the 40s and 50s. And his train is probably very plush inside, but it's just a normal train with bulletproof panels on the side. So we're not talking about a fast and technologically advanced piece of transportation equipment here. I think our trains that we ordered that were too tall or too big for our railways here when Prasa made that terrible decision, probably more high tech than Kim Jong Un's train. Just saying.
Or do you think the recently reopened Kwamashu city center corridor has better trains? Maybe.
That's a photo finish between North Korea and Kwamashu. I think it's a photo finish. Also, I don't know how long they're going to keep working there because there are obviously lots of people, especially the taxi operators, in whose best interests the train is not. I think we all know. Okay, so let's look at some other stuff quickly from this is
Are we looking at headlines?
yeah, disgusting story. Listen to this. Blah. The Pacific beetle cockroach, unlike most cockroaches, which are oviparous, is so disgusting. It is responsible for producing a unique liquid known as lilymip that is rich in protein and serves as nourishment for its offspring.
I don't want to know. I don't want to know.
Wait a second. Beyond
Don't
its
want to know
nutrition,
anymore.
cockroach milk offers environmental advantages compared to traditional dairy and plant. Pumi's left the studio. And plant-based milk production. However, there are still significant hurdles to overcome before this unconventional superfood becomes a staple in human diets. One challenge lies in obtaining sufficient quantities because you have to
Because
milk.
how many cockroaches will you milk to get 1 liter of
Milk.
No.
Milk the cockroach. And they actually think we're going to drink this shit. They need to break down cultural barriers that have long deterred people from consuming insects and their derivatives.
Eating cockroaches.
Well, yeah, good luck with that, whoever you are who's proposing this. I'm not eating insects and I'm not eating insect milk, and especially not cockroach milk. So goodbye and thank you. I'm done with that. There's no
somebody
way.
somebody will have to like grow the cockroaches. They'll have to be kept somewhere. Millions of them. No, can we have another story, please?
No, but I do think there's something weird going on in this world. There is obviously a group of people. No, Pumi, it's disgusting, but there is a group of people somewhere who is hugely invested. There's somebody who's pushing this agenda in a big way because we constantly get news about superfood,
eating bugs,
insect. Always, there's one every week in the news. Now, who is behind this? Who are these people who are so into this insect thing? But humans must eat the bugs. You must eat the bugs. Who's this? Who is this person?
It's the vegans. It's just the only meat you can get is.
Derek says if bed bugs get their name because they live in a bed, where do cockroaches live? Buddy Dave says, I draw the line at garlic snails with cheese.
Uh,
What if you find a cockroach in the cockroach milk? Well, you probably have a crunchy experience. There is no smoothie, I don't care how delicious it is, that
this
I will drink
conversation.
with cockroach milk in it. And I don't want to know how they get the cockroach milk. I think it's just this is so disgusting.
So when I came to the studio this morning, I had a bit of a toothache.
Oh yeah.
Now I have a raging headache because I can't believe we've gone from talking about wet farts to talking about cockroach milk. I can't believe this is the day I'm having. I can't believe this is how my day is starting, guys. Gareth,
Well, this is
be better.
listen, Congo
Be
Chris says
better.
Klaus Schwab. It's all Klaus Schwab. He's the one who wants us to eat the cockroaches.
Is he's the one controlling the hive mind.
Yeah, I'm just so disgusted that people keep suggesting this in the news. It's
Mm-mm,
constantly being
mm-mm,
yes,
mm-mm,
they are trying their best to sell us this story about
mm-mm.
you've got the insects are such good nutrition, protein rich, and we can survive on the insects. And please just stop. Whoever's behind this, we see you, we see through you. Stop it. We can tell what you're up to. It's nonsense. All right. Eskom has hit a billion-dollar milestone, and guess what? It's no cause for celebration. Due to Eskom's struggles with its generation units, Bloomberg, that's the international news agency Bloomberg, reported that the utility's data shows it generated more energy from its open cycle gas turbines that run on diesel in the financial year that began on 1 April than in the previous year. Eskom spent more than $1 billion on diesel in the past
Where's
year.
the diesel mafia?
Right. Through 31 March,
Interstage left.
more than double the previous period, and the bill is set to escalate even further. Eskom wasn't made immediately available to comment, and of course they won't comment on this, but this is absolutely appalling. So even when we thought load shedding was not a thing, and let's say they got it a little bit more under control, clearly all they were doing is burning diesel. So now we have our answer.
We've always known they were burning diesel. We knew they were burning diesel.
Now we have it in black and white, and we now have the amount over $1 billion. That's 18.9 billion rand. Okay, it's a lot of money.
Yeah. This morning when I
And then,
woke up, the first story I read, because
mm,
so I went to bed at 8 last night because load shedding, right?
for you.
Because
Okay, well,
yeah, I'm not bothered to make any kind of plan if it's at 8. So of course I've been up since 2. But that's
mhm.
beside the point. The first story I read this morning was Daily Investor about, and now I thought I'd saved it to tell you all about how Cyril Ramaphosa is the worst president we've ever had because of how much debt that he has racked us into more debt than what the apartheid government left for the new government when it started. We've got more debt than we've had in 46 years.
As if there weren't already enough reasons to dislike him. How's that? Let's save some of this for when we get to the burning platform later on, because we're going to be joined this morning by the mayor of Tshwane, who's been in the news quite a lot. He's been fighting strikes and all kinds of other things, and his name is
And lost a
Cilliers.
court case yesterday.
Yeah, correct. And his name is Cilliers Brink. We got lots to talk to him about. He's from the DA, and he is the mayor of Tshwane. We'll see how it's going in Tshwane, what he thinks of his court defeat yesterday, whether or not that's the end of the story, and plenty of other good stuff. So we are going to be joined by him. And I'm sure you have lots of questions too. You can send us your questions. We'll put them to Cilliers Brink a little bit later on, the Tshwane mayor. You are surprised, and you can't believe, Phumi, that two very well-known songs came out in 1971, which would make them how old now?
It's more than that.
52 years old, more than half a
Yeah,
decade ago. So what are these songs?
listen, only the awesomest songs in my book, and there's a whole documentary about songs that came out in 1971. These are not the only ones, but this is Imagine,
John Lennon.
John Lennon, and Marvin Gaye, Make Me Wanna Holler.
Wow.
Like
1971.
on opposite ends of the world almost, right? In
Yep.
both figuratively and literally, right? Because one Black America, one middle class British. And these
Although
songs for me,
I think John Lennon,
he was
that
in New
whole
York at the time.
yeah, he was in New York and he was already Yoko Onoing it up, and they weren't they were doing bed-ins where they were living in their apartment in the Dakota building,
So it was
and
before. It was
uh,
just as he moved over to New York. It was before the bid in. But bloody hell, what was in the air in 1971? Like, and there's a whole documentary. It's 8 episodes. It's on, I think it's on Apple TV, called The Year That Music Changed Everything.
wow,
But you know
so that was the year 71.
what is really amazing, mind blowing for me is how both those songs, in the context of today, still make absolute sense in every way.
Yeah,
It's still
no,
we still feel like that, right? We still feel like war is a useless waste of flesh. We still feel like everything the government is doing sucks. And
I used to think that Imagine was this powerful anthem of skepticism about the world and why are we
burn
still doing
everything down.
right, but it strikes me as just plain destructive. After with a little bit of hindsight now, and we've got 50 years of hindsight on that song, 52 years. Um, I'm not that impressed by Imagine anymore. Also, it's the kind of song that, to me, um, it's the kind of song that impresses really small minds. It's like when you hear it and you're 15, yes, I expect that you would be impressed by it. But if you still think it's impressive by the time you get to 40, I think you have a very small mind because it's
But it
just like, just break it all, burn it all. It's all wrong. Tantrum, tantrum, tantrum. Imagine all the people, just harmony and peace and love. It's just nonsense. I mean, I
but
can't
it's
take that
about the
song very
destruction of everything else. It's
correct.
about the fact that the disillusionment, and we spoke about this when we were speaking about Mr. Hitchens the other day, is
Mm,
it's actually like that's why. So for me, that's why it's still so impressive, right? That every year a new crop, like Bob Marley, every year a new crop of kind of angry teenagers discovers
mm.
this song
Yeah,
and it still blows their mind.
right. But I think
That
that's it.
is
That song is appropriate for the teenage mind because
it
that's
is
how
I
teenagers think. It's just what's horrible about it is if you still think that in your if you still think Imagine is in terms of its content, I'm not even saying as a song because it's I mean it's a very catchy song, right? But it's a stupid song. That's what I'm saying. It's a stupid song of stupid ideas. And John Lennon, I love his music. He was a genius musician. He was a genius composer. His best work was with Paul. I will never, ever attempt to break that down in any way because I'm out of my depth if I even try. And they probably were the greatest songwriting team of the entire 20th century. It's not saying too much. But his politics, his ideas, I mean, Mark David Chapman did us a favor there. That's all I'm.
How terrible. What a terrible person you are.
Ah,
Terrible person
Carl
you are.
says, Gareth, you can't be cynical about one of the greatest songs ever written. Are you just trying to get a reaction? It's gold. Don't be like this. Go and look at the lyrics again. Honestly, uh, Carl, try again. Congo Chris says there's a photo of John and Yoko standing and watching a maid make their bed for them during their bed in. Performative bullshit activists living in luxury. But that's the point. And I mean, as much as we would love to blame Yoko for everything, John was a lunatic. He was a lunatic, man. I mean, he's a dirty hippie. Like, he's just a dirty hippie, really.
Shame, man. Dirty hippie.
Yeah. And so was she. But she can't be blamed. We can't just make Yoko, because I used to make this. I used to make fun of Yoko at every opportunity. And have you ever seen that terrible video of John and Marvin Gaye and Yoko performing together, and they're standing there on the stage, and Yoko's going, and the other two, who are actual musicians, are trying to keep the music going. And you just look at everyone on the stage except John, who obviously loves Yoko so much. He's like totally pussy whipped. And everyone else is looking at her while she's doing this as if they're part of
And
some.
Marvin always has that, like, because he always thought, he's marvelous. He has that look at his face like, what are we doing with this crazy chick?
She's insane.
Now.
She's totally insane. I mean, we've come full circle though, Phumi, because we started with cockroach milk and now we're talking about dead beetles. So there we go. What can I say? No. All right. What else do you want to throw in before we get to the burning platform this morning? There's still other stuff on your agenda. I know you wanted to talk about the Sackler family and OxyContin, which is obviously one of the biggest and most destructive drugs in America. Millions of people on what they now call opioids, but the main one there being OxyContin. And the Sackler family are this, like, they almost are also out of central casting. They're these horrible, horrible people.
I'm in a rabbit hole,
Mhm.
in an absolute fucking rabbit hole with this thing, because obviously, so for those of you who don't know, in 2021, the case was finally settled and they were fined billions for their role in what is now called the opioid crisis in America, because of this drug that they formulated and kind of peddled as a painkiller initially, and then just kept upping the dosage, and every kind of destructive way of trying to get this drug out into the public through prescriptions and pharmacies, and it's a whole thing, and just the role of big pharma when it comes to what's now a real problem in America. That's the thing. Do you remember that line in one of the Batman films about how some men just want to watch the world burn?
Yeah, and it
This
reminds
is
me of
how I
John
feel
Lennon's
about
Imagine.
this guy.
Oh, really?
I am in a rabbit hole about the main scion, he is the nephew of the main Sackler who started the business. And my fucking word, this guy is a lunatic. He knew that this drug was bad. He knew it was bad from the beginning.
The founder was Raymond Sackler.
Raymond
right?
Sackler, and he was the uncle of Andrew, I think his name is Sackler, who formulated the drug.
It's not. It's actually Sackler, not Sackler. But I got you. I mean,
Yeah.
if you can make it sound worse by saying Sackler, good, because they're terrible people. Here's what they. And by the way, these people made apparently like $13 billion just off of OxyContin over the years. So look at them. Here they are. Great. Lovely looking people. Look at old Raymond in the front there. He makes Joe Biden look vital. Look at him.
Yes.
And here's another lovely family portrait, right? Don't these people look like, it's almost like a trailer for a new Succession movie, doesn't it? Look at those women's outfits.
Well, they do actually have a bit of they do have a bit of that in the family, because how he becomes the main dude is also through kind of shenanigans. Because when the uncle dies, everybody's trying to get to be the next one in charge of it all, of the entire empire. So they do have a bit of succession going on there.
All I can tell you is, if you're upset by them, here is the list of the top 10 pharmaceutical settlements in court in order of dollar amounts. Are you ready?
Here we go. At least one list out of today.
All right, here's the list. So we didn't get our Stalinist like execution lists, but here we go. So the 2012 record was held by GlaxoSmithKline at $3 billion. Remember, if a court orders you to pay $3 billion, you've made way more than that.
Yeah.
Over time. So GlaxoSmithKline, you sons of bitches. There they are, $3 billion. Pfizer, $2.3 billion in 2009. Then Johnson & Johnson in 2013, $2.2 billion. By the way, these are only amounts that they have been forced to pay by losing in court. So this is when people
or actually like making a settlement. So they didn't even go through the court process.
Abbott, $1.5 billion in 2012. Eli Lilly, $1.42 billion in 2009. Merck, $950 million in 2011. And Amgen, $762 million in 2012, and so on and so on. But GlaxoSmithKline, there are the biggest offenders with $3 billion awarded in 2012. I mean, that's disgusting. These pharmaceutical companies are appalling. And here is something else that you might want to know. Johnson & Johnson have had to pay a very big civil settlement of $1.72 billion.
Listen, for talc powder, for baby powder.
Their criminal fines amount to $419 million. Criminal fines. And that was about the drug Risperdal. It wasn't even the talcum powder.
Yes.
So
listen,
you scratch the surface. You scratch the surface on the Sackler family. I raise you. GlaxoSmithKline, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Abbott, and Eli Lilly. How about that?
Listen, the GSK story is also a wild, wild story. And the fact that all of these companies, besides the billions and billions and billions that they have made, it's also the fact that even as they're fined these amounts, their lives just continue. Because they're enveloped away from the business. So they're not fined directly. They still have their millions.
Look at those Stepford wives on the right-hand side of this picture with those hairstyles. Who looks like that? You know who looks like that?
I know that Kippy in the red there.
People who don't care. Those people do not give a shit how many people are on OxyContin in America, and they don't care about the opioid crisis. They're like, yeah, bring it on.
Is this is not them. I think this is from the film. I don't think this is them.
I think that's really, here's the real one.
This is them. This is them.
All right, you got me. But there we go.
Yeah, because that's Matthew Broderick.
Suka. Damn it. I thought you'd fall for it. Damn.
I was like, let me look at these people properly. That's Matthew Broderick over there in the corner. But they are very Succession-esque. The story is very Succession-esque.
So, okay, what have we learned from the last 5 minutes of talking about pharmaceutical companies? Don't trust these people as far as you can throw them. Because when they come at you the next time, when they've got some miraculous vaccine for something that's going around the world, just say no is the answer, right? Just say no, everybody. Let's not be fooled. We won't be fooled again, as the Who used to say.
Oh, guys. But and all the documentaries now, obviously, there's like
after this in the Burning Platform, we like your questions. We want them to be a part of the conversation. So if you have something you want to ask the mayor of the capital city, send them to us and drop them in the comments section. We will be sure to put them up on the screen if we get a chance with the mayor. Lots of good stuff on the way. cliffcentral.com on a Thursday. Don't go anywhere.
the way we raised it obviously shapes us. But the beautiful thing about it is that we can take the few things from it and apply it to how we want to then raise our kids. You know, we don't have to copy paste.
Exactly.
Because maybe not everything works.
Exactly.
You know, maybe some of those things, they can stay in those eras.
Definitely. And you can see yourself as well. Like I can see myself when I'm being my mom. And I'm like, ooh, I'm now the strict mom.
Yeah.
Let me tone it down a bit, you know, so that I can accommodate her. Because really how I was raised is different to how I'm raising my daughter.
Sure.
Like the times have changed. You know, things have moved on, and the way things are done now, they're no longer the same. So I've really learned to change.
We're going to cry, laugh, and love. And we're going to do it together. The Life with Lebang podcast.
Which person doesn't like sugar?
Yeah, no, everyone likes sugar. Now, when I've got clients come to me and they say, I don't eat sugar, what they really mean is they don't put sugar in their coffee, or they don't go and eat a chocolate every day, but there's sugar in everything. There's sugar in processed foods. There's sugar in breads. There's sugar in sauces. Sugar is hiding everywhere, and sugar's in alcohol. Sugar's in everything. And this is the underlying issue of most lifestyle diseases today, is the amount of sugar we think we're not eating, that's hiding in places.
That was the Tea Health Show, empowering you with knowledge. Download all previous episodes on your favorite podcast platform. The Tea Health Show is brought to you by Tea Clinic.
All right, it is time for the Burning Platform. This is what we do on a Thursday. We catch up with all the big stories in the news. We try to get on top of everything that is happening in your world, the stuff that affects you the most. And certainly one of the things that's been affecting me the most, because I live in the municipality of the mayor we're about to be talking to, is garbage and rubbish removal, collections, all of that stuff. The mayor of Tshwane, I'm glad to say, has made time for us this morning. There's some mayors, like Guamanda in Joburg, we'll never talk to because he won't talk to anyone. But there are some mayors who make themselves available for the show and who also are trying, I suppose, their level best in a very, very difficult situation. I don't know whether he's a villain or a hero yet, and maybe he's neither, but I'm thrilled that he's on the show this morning. His name is Cilliers Brink. Mayor, it's good to see you. Thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
Gareth, great to be with you.
Good. So how long have you been in office now? How's it going?
Well, it's going pretty tough. I've been in office since March, and I've had 132 kV pylons falling down, a cholera outbreak, recurring water crises, and of course now this unprotected SAMU strike. That's not just a strike, but more of a violent onslaught on our infrastructure and services. So it's going pretty tough, but I'm still here.
So you're enjoying it. I mean, it's everything you hoped it would be.
Well, it's you go into politics, you want to be the mayor one day. You don't get to choose the circumstances of that challenge. And so you just have to take it. It's next level politics and government. And it's important to note that if we have a coalition government in this country, if our multi-party democracy actually works, this is the type of thing that we're going to face in provincial government, in national government. Can you deal with the crises? Can you deal with a heavily politicized civil service and deliver on your electoral mandate? So it is exhilarating, of course, but also quite stressful, I have to admit.
All right. So, I mean, after the show, I don't mind if you want to come around in your own car and pick up my rubbish. But this is obviously the big story of the moment. So let's get straight into it, because Phumi said you didn't do so well in the courts yesterday. And now where are we on this strike that you mentioned? Where is this SAMU strike going to lead? Have you got a plan B, C, D?
No,
E?
man, you're conflating two issues. This was 2 days ago. The court order was about something else. But start with the strike and then we'll talk about that.
Okay, so in essence, the strike is about the salary increases which Tshwane cannot afford to grant. That budget with 0% salary increases was approved by the municipal council, not the mayor. It's not me who decided we can't afford it. We did a realistic, rational assessment of the finances. The budget was supported by the ANC, our biggest opponent to the coalition, and that included authorizing the city manager to apply to the bargaining council to be exempted from these salary increases. Unfortunately, the bargaining council decided against us, but we really believe that the bargaining council misdirected itself. It looked at what we spent on salaries last year and the fact that we underspent on salaries last year, and then just concluded, oh, but you underspent, so you must have something left, which of course, cash flow wise and in the reality that we're in makes absolutely no sense. So we're taking that decision of the bargaining council on review. We believe there are good grounds for that. As an aside, I am not aware of any such bargaining council exemption that's ever been granted. So I don't think South Africa is quite prepared to do such a radical thing as not to give government employees salary increases. But we will follow the process and make our arguments in the Labour Court. And in the meantime, obviously, the decision of the bargaining council is suspended.
Well,
So
yeah, go ahead,
Gareth, you
Pums.
go first.
I mean, I don't know why it's just an automatic thing that government employees seem to get increases when everyone else in this country is lucky if they just manage to compete with inflation, and most of us are not. So I don't understand how the civil service in this country, the huge overweening bureaucracy that we have, how they manage to just get these automatic increases is beyond me. And it's now just taken for granted. It's like, well, we'll give you 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12%, and you'll just get what you ask for every time because you otherwise threaten us like terrorists with violence.
Well, I think that what's happening in Tshwane is exactly why municipalities and government in general don't want to have a wage dispute with organized labor. You're sitting with a heavily politicized trade union. SAMU is part of the COSATU Alliance, and I have the fullest respect for trade unions, for collective bargaining, for workers' rights. We have to have that. But because of that additional power of being connected to national government and having, this reputation of, if you don't pay us our demands, we're going to trash the streets, we're going to bring waste collection to an end, we're going to sabotage water and electricity. Most municipalities, who, by the way, can't afford these increases, are just too afraid to take up the fight. And what I have said, what we've said in Tshwane, is that we are more afraid of running out of money than we are of SAMU. And we are prepared to fight, to stand our ground, because if we pay these salary increases, within 3 months, we won't be able to make payroll. And folks, the irony is, this weekend, SAMU and COSATU launched a mass action campaign in the Free State against municipalities that can't pay salaries on time, that withhold pension contributions. And my message to them is, that is exactly what we're trying to avoid in Tshwane. Now,
You're in good company. But you're in good company because even the president has spoken about the fact that he will be cutting jobs. He's spoken about cutting something like 85,000 jobs, I think he's spoken about. And the fact that even for national government, they are having to reconsider what their salary bill looks like and looking very much like they're standing at the edge of the cliff and not being able to pay salaries in the coming months. So you're in good company.
That's definitely the situation. And we don't want to cut jobs. We want to protect jobs. We really do. We don't want to be in a position where we have to restructure. But then, we got to be realistic about the payroll, about what we can afford. It's not about this month or the next month. It's about the next decade. And the important point really is that salaries, benefits, and those things are not paid by the municipality. We don't have our own money. They are paid by rates and tariffs and other charges of residents. And unfortunately, after lockdown, payment levels in Tshwane and many other places never returned to normal. In Tshwane, it was even worse because the municipality was placed under administration during lockdown. So there's a breakdown of systems and controls. But we need to also know and understand the end of what our consumers, our residents, can afford. And it's not about what can you pay, mayor, what can the council, it's what can the residents pay.
So, there is an argument about how we fight these illegal strikers at this point, because obviously, I think you would have the majority of residents in the city on your side. None of us, and really, Pretoria looks absolutely disgusting. And for the first time in ages, I drove through town into Pretoria North, which I haven't done for a very long time. I had to go there for a business meeting, and I was just appalled at the way that our capital city looks. It looks like Donald Trump once used the term a shithole country to describe places that he looked down on. And we look like a shithole country when I drive through not just our capital, but Johannesburg as well. There's rubble everywhere. There's rubbish everywhere. There's no self-respect. There's no dignity in these places. And I'm pissed off as a resident. And it must be very, very frustrating for you to now have to be held to ransom by the people who meant to clean up the city, the people who are paid to do so, and then to have the residents, banging on your door saying, like, what are you going to do about it? So, I mean, where do you go? Where do you go with this? Do you fight these guys? Do you wait them out? Do you take them to court until they run out of resources? Do we do Margaret Thatcher type tactics and go to the end of this so that we can win? Or do we keep letting them hold us to ransom?
So let me just say that if we were to buckle, because Gareth, you're quite right, we are being squeezed. We're being squeezed at the one end by folks who, and it's not the majority of our workforce, it's a small group, and I believe it's increasingly an elite who are driving their own political and economic interests. Because remember, if Tshwane were to, say, be placed under administration again, there are factions and individuals who will benefit from the situation. There's no doubt in my mind. But if we were to be squeezed in this situation and come up with a so-called political solution, that's always the demand, let's come up with a political solution, then we would have failed the moment, and we would have reinforced a culture of impunity and also legitimized violence as a negotiating gambit. So then we can be assured that in future, if there's any disagreement, that it will be resolved by violence. That's the message that will be sent. And that will have devastating effects. So now that we know what will happen if we buckle, perhaps it's easier for us to understand why it's important for us to stand our ground and to treat this for what it is. And it's not a labor dispute anymore. It is organized crime. We are very dependent on the South African police, and you might conclude that because of that, we're screwed. But we can't. And I must also say we've had wonderful support from civil society, from private security companies who don't charge us a cent, but who send out their cars and their patrols to accompany waste removal trucks, inner city cleaning teams. And really, there's been this groundswell of community support. And we can't betray those folks. We can't betray the folks who come to work, who want to work, by now buckling to the demands of a small, violent elite who want to disrupt us. So we are going to be applying our own pressure. I spoke to the Minister of Police yesterday, and I said to him, we really need far better support. And it's not visible policing or patrols or any of that stuff. We know the police don't have cars in many instances. It is crime intelligence. It's intercepting calls, intercepting WhatsApp messages to see where are these folks going to strike next, who's responsible, getting arrest warrants. That is how we're going to break the strike. And my other warning to him was, we are in a place with a number of national key points. And if you think and treat this as an ordinary labor dispute, it is going to spiral out of control, and national installations are going to get attacked. And then everybody's going to say, oh, but why did you not do anything? And it's important now to project that worst case scenario into the future. Say a fuel truck is attacked and it explodes in a built-up area and folks get hurt. What is the excuse of the police going to be as to why they did not give this the highest priority attention?
Well, I mean, you meet with the Minister of Police, and I immediately kind of roll my eyes. Did you get anywhere with him? I mean, are are we at a point in South Africa where we can still have reasonable discussions with the people who are supposedly in charge of these departments?
I must say, every time I phone the Minister of Police, he takes my calls. He's very reasonable. But of course, we understand that, he operates within certain constraints. Within his political alliance, SAMU is a member. So, I would hope that political considerations don't hold him back. But in the absence of that, I have to give the warning that, you think this is a labor dispute between Tshwane and SAMU, but I am quite convinced that this thing has already been hijacked by criminals with their own political and economic interests. And this might even turn up, blowing up in the face of national government. So realpolitik of this situation is that the situation has to be contained.
All right, Phumi, I know
there's so many. There's so many little nuances that I think, and some of them you've alluded to them, Mayor. The fact that it's not necessarily what the city says it can pay. It's also about the residents, and we know that we're dealing in South Africa with, and Tshwane being one of the biggest municipalities that we have in the country. You've got a wide-ranging type of residents, and many of those residents are very poor, and the job losses and the economic situation that we're looking at an extremely squeezed populace. And so even as you're talking about what the city can afford, what the people can afford too is another thing, and you have to balance all of those things out. And I'm not sure if this is a winning combination. But I don't want us to get too bogged down in, and I know you and Gareth, because it's your city, it's very important. These issues are very important to you, but we've got listeners from all over the country. And one of the things I am most interested in, speaking of the municipality and the fact that you are working in a coalition, is really what kind of lessons you think you have learned at Tshwane as a DA mayor, councillor, that you can take into your national space, and how the coalition could work going forward. Because a couple of weeks ago, we saw some very shameful scenes between Herman Mashaba and Solly Simang at the gathering at News 24. Doesn't bode well for people who are even considering maybe supporting the coalition.
Yes, and I'm sure when Herman and Solly get into government, and Solly has been in government, in fact, so he understands all about what the challenges are.
Sorry, he was just re-elected, or rather, he's going to be the candidate running
Premier
for Premier
candidate.
again.
Yes, Solly's going to be our Premier candidate in Gauteng. And when you face the scale of the challenges that we do in Tshwane, you sort of get a wake-up call and understand that all of the smaller differences are perhaps, less important. You will be taking over an exceptionally politicized civil service, whether it is, at provincial or national level. Folks are going to work tirelessly to undermine you from the inside, and this is what we've experienced in Tshwane, the violent fight back against our administration. And so you really have to have your act together, and you have to stand united, and you have to understand what your principles are, and that those principles will be tested in practice. So, that is the most important lesson. But the other lesson for Tshwane, of course, is it's the one city where we have a majority in the council. It's a paper-thin majority, where we don't have, say, the Patriotic Alliance, who are just in coalition for jobs and tenders. And so there is a measure of coherence. And I believe that Tshwane is the one place where we can actually, despite all of these challenges, which aren't unique to the capital city, by the way, it's the one place where we can really model what a coalition government would look like, and to model how it would react in incredibly difficult circumstances, which are bound to happen at national level.
Yeah, it's going to be a complicated road to navigate. And as you say, there's so many competing interests here that actually we've got to call out people for what they really stand for here. Just remind us, Phumi, because I didn't see those shameful scenes between Solly and what happened? No, what happened?
So at News 24, 3 weeks
Yeah.
ago now, I think, had a what they call the gathering, and they had a whole lot of panels on various parts about various things happening in South Africa. And they had a political panel, and Solly and Herman were on the panel alongside Songezo Zibi. And this event happened 2 days after what was supposed to have been a vote of no confidence in Johannesburg on the mayor.
Mhm.
And the DA councillors couldn't agree with the Action SA councillors and therefore didn't support the motion. And that escalated. They didn't support the motion. It didn't go ahead. We still have Mayor Gwamanda here in Gwamanda here in Johannesburg. And that translated, even in that conversation, which was supposed to have been a conversation really around what South Africa looks like post 2024. And the two of them couldn't agree, and it completely degenerated the entire panel into a fight, into a bun fight about something completely unrelated to what was even supposed to happen. And I think for the audience, rightly so, about 300 people in the audience, horrifying, because now we're watching these two supposed leaders of this organization who just a week prior had agreed to work together, fighting each other for something that, and it just, for all of us watching, it was so like, I wonder what happens behind the closed doors, and can they get anything done?
On that note, because that is disappointing, but Mayor, you guys have in Tshwane, I mean, I remember there were scenes in the Tshwane City Council not so long ago, which were also like it's almost like open war in there and people just behaving horribly. Is there a seriousness about our political leadership in this country, or is it really for so many people just venal? And I don't expect you to to come to the defense of Tshwane in this respect. But what Phumi's telling us here, and this is unfortunately the reality that those of us in the public who are expected to then vote in the upcoming elections, what we're seeing is probably part of the reason that people are not taking politics so seriously, and they are apathetic, and they see so much of this stuff where we see, ward councillors or city councillors like standing on desks and like getting into fisticuffs and all this kind of thing. And you had that not so long ago when you were elected. Thank God things are calmed down a little bit. How do you take control of situations like this and restore public trust in the political leadership?
If I could just respond quickly to what Phumi said, I think the disagreement between Solly and Herman wasn't frivolous. There is a fundamental issue there, and that is what government you put in place once you remove the ANC. And that might sound like, political bickering. Why don't they just get along, remove the ANC, the useless ANC chap, and put something else together? But it's really important that if the coalition, if this pact, which, is meant to give a compelling alternative, if we replace the ANC, we better as hell be, better than the ANC. We really do have to be better. And in Joburg, you have the Patriotic Alliance, Gayton McKenzie, which, very popular on some of the chattering classes. But the fact is, he essentially operates patronage politics at a level that's almost worse than the ANC. So if you're going to replace the ANC with that and invite a guy like that into your midst, into your coalition, you have to understand that your brand, your offer, your reputation, what Gareth spoke about, that relationship of trust between you and the people, that's going to be seriously compromised. So as personality driven, ego driven as the fights often seem, it's also important for people to understand the considerations there. Now, Gareth, I honestly do believe, and of course I'll say this, but there are good guys and there are bad guys. And it's not like we go to council in order to disrupt the thing, because my government, the coalition, DA, Action SA, Freedom Front Plus, IFP, ACDP, we actually haven't got an interest in having fist fights. We want orderly council meetings where the provincial government can't say, oh, you can't govern the city, let's place it under administration. We want to appoint new senior managers. We want to get policies about energy independence passed. So we don't have an interest in disrupting the council meeting. And again, it's not just frivolity. There are very serious interests in Tshwane, I believe linked to the ANC and the EFF, who don't want to see that council making progress. To give you a few examples, if we start acting against senior officials in the administration, folks who've been maintaining a culture of patronage and corruption, that's when you're going to see violence in council. It's not personality driven. There are actual serious interests being threatened, and that's how, especially the EFF, deploy their guns and make sure that they get their political agenda served.
All right. Well, I mean, in
What
that case,
what then
good luck
becomes
to you.
the-
Good luck to you in putting that down.
Yeah, because what then becomes the solution? How does one, because for me as a voter, I am looking to any leadership of whoever I give my vote to say, I want a solution from you. Right? If you're going to have, and I understand that the fights are not necessarily personality driven, but my view is that if you're going into a coalition, have the fights behind closed doors, and when you come out into the public, be in the same place, right? I don't want to see you fighting it out in front of us. What you put in front of us should be what you stand for. Of course, you're going to have the fight. Of course, you're going to have the disagreements. You have 5 people vying for one position at any one time when you are a coalition, right? So, but by the time you get in front of the people, you must have your story straight. You can't be fighting in front of the people around that. So what then becomes the solution?
Phumi, I think you and Gareth speak about related but perhaps distinct issues. As for the coalition, I happen to think that we're in a much better place. As much as, folks see these things and they think these guys haven't got their house in order, we are fighting far less. We now have this pact, the Moonshot Pact, and we're discussing policy issues. And I believe that we are going through teething problems. This country isn't used to coalitions. We're used to one-party dominance, whether it be the National Party or the ANC. But we're making a transition, and you have all of these different interest groups who make their own contributions to an alternative. And of course, you're going to have disagreements. You are going to have disagreements about economic policy, foreign policy, personality. And let's go through the difficult spots now, even if it means every now and again washing our dirty, laundry, airing our dirty laundry in public. And let's make sure that once we're in power, we've had the fights. We know what we believe about China, for example, or race-based policy, or economic policy, or labor policy. So I do believe that we're making progress. And if I just look at Tshwane, we used to have a fight with Action SA in particular after every council meeting. And it's almost as if this assault that is being directed against us is forcing us to stand together to look at the important issues. And I believe what we're modeling in Tshwane, I don't want to make too much of it, is perhaps a good example for the rest of the country. Touch wood. Things can still go terribly wrong.
You know what? I also wanted to have you on because we always deal with these immediate, top of mind crises first and foremost. But I also like to hear, and I think what's missing so often in South Africa is the vision of what could be. And I think it's really important for mayors in particular, because you guys are, at the level of government where you actually affect people's lives, where water, electricity, basic services, streets, rubbish, all of that stuff actually impacts on us in a way that national government doesn't. What do you want Tshwane to look like? And what kinds of things would you like to put in place to make it a capital city we can be proud of? What's your vision for Pretoria?
So, Gareth, the most important thing is to get a handle on the finances. The city is in financial ICU, and as unsexy an objective as that sounds, it's essentially about getting value for ratepayers' money. And it's not just the folks that can afford to pay, it's also the poor that depend on the cross-subsidization of services. We have to have our financial house in order, and that means getting our revenue collection value chain up and going, making sure that the city doesn't award rotten tenders. And I've got to tell you now that the supply chain management division of the city is absolutely rotten to the core. And we've got to be candid about that and clean it out and replace it with something that does deliver value. The second important thing is cities and municipalities have an essential role to play in making communities less dependent on Eskom. We have to invest in programs to generate our own electricity and procure from IPPs. And as much as you've seen disruption in Tshwane's council meetings, the one in August was violently disrupted. One of my colleagues had his shirt ripped off from his torso, and I think you alluded to a bit of the just the chaos of that. But that problem was solved by having a virtual meeting on Tuesday, and at that virtual meeting, council passed, despite all of our differences, a report to take on public participation the proposal to lease the Pretoria West and Rooiwal power stations, mothballed power stations that used to operate in the past, to lease that out to the private sector. And together with that, and procuring from IPPs, Tshwane hopes to get at least 1,000 megawatt of electricity. That's about 40%, 45% of our total use, independent from Eskom, in the next 3 years. And that's going to have a significant effect for the city and our residents. Lastly, it is crucial that we get professionalism and productivity out of our workforce. And that's why the fight over the wage increases is so important. We can't be co-managing the city with politicized trade unions. We can't be having our own workforce sabotaging the city in the run-up to elections because they believe that that will have a favorable outcome. And the way we achieve that is by putting the right people in place. We're about to appoint, if we can have an orderly council meeting again, as we had this week, to appoint new senior managers, new brooms. And the last way that you change a culture is by events, dear boy, events. You stand up to these interest groups, and if you can survive, you grow stronger. So, Gareth, my vision really is for value for money, energy independence, overcoming load shedding, and having a productive workforce that serves the people, building a capital city that can work for all of its people that we can really be proud of.
Well, I mean, power to you if you're going to achieve any of that. I think people will be on your side. And I think people rally to a cause more because there is a promise of something better coming than just surviving the immediate disasters that Tshwane is no, it's no stranger to these things. And the capital city should be a place that we can be proud of. It certainly isn't at the moment. And I always wonder why anyone would take the kind of job that you've taken here, because it's your phone ringing at all hours and having to put out fires, sometimes very literally put out fires.
And why? You go, Mayor. I'll ask afterwards.
So as tough as my job is, the toughest job is that of a ward councillor. And that's maybe one thing me and the ANC, the DA and the ANC have in common, is we've got ward councillors. Because when the water isn't restored and the electricity is out and the waste isn't being collected, folks phone the ward councillor, or in the township, they go knock on your door. And one of my commitments is really to support the ward councillor and to explain to the public that these folks don't, in fact, do the operational stuff themselves. They're dependent on officials. So, yeah, Gareth, it's about understanding that we all have a level of involvement in our communities. This whole idea that the government is the service provider, the residents are the consumers, that's a bit of an outdated concept. We're all in this together. We all have a civic responsibility, and it's difficult to say that to folks who haven't had their waste collected in such a long time. But perhaps it's a way of just explaining that unless we fight for this country, unless we fight for our communities and the society that we want, then there's no chance of us ever reaching any sort of a place where we can say we've got a capital city we can be proud of, where there's a upward social mobility for the poor, where the streets are safe, and so forth.
One of the jobs that you also have to do, is untangling a web, as it were, that you walk into. There is a mess that you walked into that council with, and there's a huge untangling of that mess. And I think the first place and the backbone of some of what you're talking about really does live in the IT infrastructure. And do you want to tell us a little bit about the IT tender that the court ruled on 2 days ago?
So let me just say from the outset, as I have, Tshwane's supply chain management system is rotten. And it's important to realize that councillors, the mayor, we're not allowed to sit on tender committees. In fact, we're barred by law from having any role in the tender process. We only see the results of tenders looking in the rearview mirror when those supply chain management reports come to us. But it is our obligation to build systems of integrity, to appoint senior managers who don't fleece the ratepayers, and to make sure that there are consequences for this kind of conduct. And in Tshwane, Phumi, you've got this incredible situation where in the past decade, there's been 10 billion rand in irregular expenditure being rung up. Now, many of that is from contracts and stuff pre-2016, the Payo smart meter contract, the broadband contract, the fleet contract, contracts which you can cancel them, but there's still a period under which certain services are to be rendered. And every single cent that you spend on a contract that's been declared irregular is irregular expenditure. So 10 years, we've had 4 or 5 mayors since 2013. We've had 3 MMCs for finance. We've had 4 city managers. We've had 2 CFOs. And we've only had 1 head of supply chain management. So you've had all of these people changing their positions, very often politicians taking the knock for all of this irregular expenditure. And yet there's one person.
Who's this person?
Still, well, I mean, I don't want to get into that, but it is an important point, Gareth,
Why
that
not?
there must be
Why not?
consequences.
Yes.
You can look it up. The person's name
No,
is there. But,
you're the mayor. Just tell us. I mean, it's a name.
yeah, let's not get
What's
into
the
that. because
problem?
there'll
What's
be-
the problem with that?
Because I don't want to compromise labor processes and disciplinary processes by getting into personality. So
We
the
had a
point
whole
is-
conversation about lists earlier on this morning. And one of the things that unfortunately happens to a lot of us South Africans is there are all these people and all these names, but the lists are very difficult to come by to say there are ministers that are involved, there are people who are involved, and we just don't know who those people are. There are very privileged few who do know.
So it's our responsibility to act and to make sure that there's disciplinary action. And I don't want to compromise any investigation by saying, oh, no, but the mayor said, this and that. But the point is, Phumi, that the changes inside the administration are essential. And I'm going to give a warning. Once we start acting against these people, the council meetings are going to get even more violent. You're going to see the EFF coming up with even more outrageous tactics to stop council and administration from functioning, because there are networks of corruption in the city. And we've got to act, with responsibility. We've got to act in a way that doesn't drag officials into the politics. But Tshwane's supply chain management system, our tender system, is rotten. And that's why part of my number one priority, getting the city out of its financial ICU, is a clean out of supply chain management. And I want to make a prediction that as soon as we start acting there, you are going to get all sorts of accusations against us. And it's important that the public at least have a forewarning of what is to come.
But what can the public do? So
Yeah.
what can the public do? Do we just sit back and wait to hear from you? Or what can the public do in terms of,
certainly
because the frustration exists for the public too. So what is it that the public can do?
Well, the public can expect very clear answers from us. What are you going to do about these irregular tenders? And the city manager and I spoke, and we're going to come up with a set of measures, including calling in the support of National Treasury, so that we have eyes on what is happening in those tender committees. Politicians aren't allowed to sit there. There is going to be disciplinary action, but I want that to come from the hand of the city manager. And so in the next week, we are going to be announcing some of those measures. And what the public can do is to hold us to account, expect results from us.
All right.
And if the public have got inside information as to what is going on, please reach out to the mayor.
All right. But
And
I
I'm
also
happy
get-
to share my details.
You do not have to comment on what I'm about to say, because I feel like this is the way a lot of people feel about some of this stuff that's going on, is they feel that, sometimes you and your coalition partners are playing by the rules when everybody else is not. And playing by the rules takes a lot longer, and it's much more cumbersome, and it doesn't necessarily deliver the result of seeing people in prison overalls that the people in Tshwane who really care about the city want to see. And I feel like this playing by the rules thing is almost working against you guys because nobody else is.
Yeah.
Why are you?
I have a friend.
But I mean, like,
No,
come on.
man, I'm happy to comment. I've got a friend who, in his era of township, lingo, said that the DA are the what he calls the Ivies, and we're up against the Pansulas. We're the clean cut guys, and we play by the rules, but we're up against a bunch of gangsters, and that's very important, Gareth, to understand. But also, if we start acting like the gangsters, there is no clear blue water between us and the gangsters. And it's a tricky terrain. You got to be very, very tough. And sometimes you're going to make calls that are going to lose you cases in court or with the CCMA or the bargaining council. You are going to get accused of interference in the administration. But I do think that us playing by the rules is an important thing. It's an important moral high ground, which if we lose that, then it's just gangsters against gangsters. It's everyone against everyone. And it's more difficult for us, but we got to try play by the rules. And at the same time, be ruthless in a very sophisticated sort of way.
Okay, well, I mean, good luck. I just feel like, people are also, they're getting increasingly frustrated. And sometimes the rules are just nonsense rules. There are so many things. I listen to how a city's managed, for example, and it boggles my mind that you're the mayor, you are the government, and yet there's so many things you can't do. Who set up these rules? And were they set up especially because we just knew we were going to have crooks in place? So we tried to keep them as far from actually executing authority as possible. It's like a distributed leadership type of model. I mean, I hear that you can't get involved in supply chain management, which is just, I mean, it's crazy to me. Is this because of corruption? Is that why we have these complicated systems?
So we imported a whole lot of sophisticated rules from Canada and Europe and the United States and so forth. And I think there was good intentions behind it. And unfortunately, what you get in South Africa is very sophisticated legislation, regulations, world-class stuff. And you never get that really policed. So the good guys abide by the rules, the bad guys ignore it in any event. And every year the Auditor General goes on about, so much in irregular expenditure, so much in fruitless and wasteful expenditure. But the point is, it is so bloody difficult just to get someone fired. And I don't mean, somebody participating in a strike. I mean, a senior manager, million rand managers. It is exceptionally difficult in this country to get rid of somebody. And that's what we tie to. The other regulations that make no sense are those relating to procurement, preferential procurement, where you've got to look at all sorts of interest groups, and at the end of the day, you waste so much money that you don't get value for your projects, you don't get value for your contracts. So that's a frustrating aspect, and that's something that we'll have to reform. But at the same time, it's very important to stay within the rule of law because that's our moral high ground.
Well, I mean, for voters,
I think the thing,
not a great motivator for voters. We're not going to be like running to the polls if we think that the people we elect aren't even empowered to be able to make these decisions. It's kind of, it frustrates us more than maybe anyone else.
No,
we've often on the show, we've often on the show spoken about the fact that the law is a particular construct, and that what is needed is people who know how to use the law to get to where they need to get to. And what we're seeing, we've spoken, Gareth, about Rudy Giuliani in New York, in cleaning up New York, and how he went to a law professor to say that I'm dealing with mafia here and I'm dealing with gangsters, and the law is not sufficient, and the way that they operate doesn't work in the way that we can. How do we work with what we have to get them? And that's why he eventually gets them on tax evasion and this is what we don't see here. Is we don't see a concerted effort that says, if this is the construct of the law and this is what's happening, how do we make the law work for us to get rid of these people? And it's easy to say, yeah, it's difficult to get rid of people here. But what I'm also very interested in, with the few short minutes we have left, is Cape Town is often held up as this center of excellence, not just for the DA, but for the country as a whole. Why has it been so difficult for the Tshwane DA to import those best practices from Cape Town and be able to do the same here?
Very important question. And, Helen Zille very often says this because she was the first DA mayor of Cape Town. She held together a coalition there of, I think, 9 parties. And what her administration did was to change the culture. And really, it is important to change the culture. The organizational culture of government is culture eats strategy for breakfast every time. You can come up with the best plans and strategies, but if your shared norms, your understanding of what's important and valuable, if that is out of whack, then all of these plans will come to naught. When Helen became mayor of Cape Town in 2006, she put together that coalition. It was at a time in Cape Town, long before cadre deployment and the culture of the ANC had taken root in Cape Town. And if you look at the political history of that place, it was largely the National Party in coalition with the ANC that had control of the Western Cape. So it was sort of a diluted ANC power there. Whereas 10 years later, the ANC mayors of Joburg, Nelson Mandela Bay, Tshwane are removed, and you've got a far more entrenched culture of ANC inside politics, of cadre deployment. You've got an entire new generation of managers who have been recruited and promoted based not on their technical expertise, but on their political connections. So what I'm saying is that in Cape Town, the political change came at a time when the fight back from inside was not nearly as strong as in the rest of the country a decade later. The second thing, of course, is that you take over from these politicized administrations, you don't have a majority in council. So Tshwane, Johannesburg, Nelson Mandela Bay, even our coalitions didn't have 50% plus 1. And then you try to take disciplinary action against a city manager or a senior manager. You try to pass a bylaw or raise a long-term loan. And unless you have a majority in the council, you can't get any of that done. And that was the situation from 2016 to 2021. It's only now in Tshwane, after 2021, that we've got a majority in the council, our coalition. And it's a paper-thin majority. It's a majority of 1. So if somebody misses 1 council meeting, potentially, your entire program of government can be taken apart. But listen, folks, I don't want to convey how tough this is and how terrible it is and, the laws. And I am absolutely determined to use what we have to get as much done as we possibly can. There are institutional blockages and resistance everywhere. And I'm not crying, woe is me. We're fighting on. We're implementing our program of action. Despite the disruptions, we got our energy report through council. So please don't take away that this is hand-wringing. It's just explaining to you the realities and why it takes so bloody long to get anything done.
I get it. And listen, as I said at the beginning of this interview, what I'm thrilled about is that you actually come on here and talk about these things with us, because most of these mayors, when we try to reach out to them, are unavailable. They're not even interested in coming to talk to us. Really, we've spoken to you and we've spoken to Mayor of Cape Town. We've tried with Ekurhuleni, eThekwini. It's not as easy to get those people on, and probably because they haven't got anything to say. They don't really have any.
Those aren't, unfortunately, Gareth. Those aren't real mayors because they are ANC puppets. So somebody else is making the decision. The mayor is just the figurehead because the ANC can't agree on whether they want to be in a coalition with the EFF, and that's why you don't see them. Decisions are made not by those elected to the positions, but in the back rooms.
I have a personal question for you, Mayor. Why? What motivated you to take this job?
That is an important question. Before I came here,
I think you know what it is. You were born in Phalaborwa, which is way worse than Tshwane. So you thought, let me go to Tshwane, and that'll be a better place to be involved in politics than Paris.
All that heat just fried my brain growing up, and I suppose now I'm here. No, I was in a relatively comfortable position as a member of parliament before I came to Tshwane. But, people who are really interested in politics, as I have been since an early age, you're ambitious. You want to take on big goals. And, you want to stretch your what you put out there. So this is as I said, it's an exhilarating job. It's an incredible challenge. I live in Pretoria. I love this place. My kids go to school here. My wife works here. And I really feel that if we lose this opportunity in the city where the coalition has a majority paper thin, where the coalition doesn't have Gayton McKenzie and all sorts of other bad actors, if we lose this opportunity, the country might lose something. So it is an exhilarating challenge. We might still fail, but far more exciting than being a member of parliament, that I can assure you.
All right. Well, listen, we really appreciate you coming to join us, and I hope that you get this rubbish thing out of the way as soon as possible, so you can focus on that bigger vision we spoke about. And good luck to you. I mean, I'd say that to every mayor. Is good luck to you. We've got a country to save, and we've got a country to get working. And anyone who's doing stuff that makes it better is worthy of some of our attention and a little bit of our praise. So good luck to you. That's all I can say.
Thanks so much, Gareth.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. There's the Mayor of Tshwane, everybody, Cilliers Brink, and he did put his, I'll put his Twitter handle on here now, so you can also get hold of him on X or wherever else you'd like to get hold of him. And listen, Pums, I mean, you and I wouldn't want that job. It sounds like he's not complaining about it, but he's got his hands full. It's going to be,
Yeah.
he's busy. He's busy. Let's put it that way.
Gareth, before we go, because you said we must wait till this section, I really want to hear your view on all of the revisionist history and all of the spewing of people's personal experiences post the death of Mangosuthu Buthelezi. It's been a very
it
crazy
is
week.
interesting. Like there've been some very curious epitaphs written in some of the better newspapers and on the better websites that I've seen recently. Of course, Mangosuthu Buthelezi was a very controversial figure. And it's a funny thing that happens when people die is people immediately jump to praise. I had a great interview with the man. I can't claim to have known him personally in any real way. Not that would make a single shred of difference. History will write what history will write about him. Some of it will be good and some of it will be bad. But I think towards the end of his life, and I'm not sure if everyone will agree with me here, but certainly my overall impression of the man was that he grew into the role of an elder statesman, of someone who had gravitas and seriousness about him. He wasn't perhaps as militant and firebrand and full of vim and vigor as he was during the 90s, when, without any shred of doubt, he was probably, as the mayor of Tshwane just used the term, a bad actor in what happened around particularly hostile violence in Gauteng, the IFP's role in, propping up various aspects of what the old government stood for, being used in some ways. And I think he was probably more personally ambitious at that point than he became later in life, where certainly I think he grew into the role of thinking more about the big picture. And the IFP became a sensible party that had a massively positive contribution to make across the board. In the beginning, he was born a prince, for heaven's sake. We keep thinking that in South Africa everybody is the same, we're all living in a democracy, but at the time Mangosuthu Buthelezi was born, there were hierarchies in place that very much still have an influence on society, especially in rural KwaZulu-Natal, in the rural Transkei, as it used to be called, Eastern Cape. And I think that these things are not to be disregarded. Mangosuthu Buthelezi was a very important name in the story of South Africa. He played a very important, sometimes divisive, sometimes unifying role. And I'm just very glad that we lived at a time where we could have seen so much going on and where he was such an important role player in all of that. I liked him more at the end, I think, than I liked him at the beginning. If I read his
or
biography.
the middle.
Or the middle. What did you think of him? I mean, are you at all misty-eyed and nostalgic about any aspect of his story, just because you might be Zulu, because you've spent so much time in KwaZulu-Natal, because you know so much more about the internal politics of the IFP? How do you feel about him? What do you think his legacy is?
I am not so much about him, but just watching the South Africans and their response has been so fascinating for me. Because if you ask today a 25-year-old, even South African, black or white, Zulu, Sotho, any kind, I think in this past week, they have been so shocked to learn that Mangosuthu is the bad guy. because this is South Africa's, we've got such amnesia. We forget the thing. So all of a sudden, and the second thing for me is the realization of what cowards so many people are in this country. Because for the past 30 years, they have been silent about the villainhood of this man. They have allowed him to just continue to become a minister of home affairs, to be the longest serving MP
Is he the acting
without
president
calling out
for-
his shit. The only person, when I woke up and I saw the note that he'd passed, the only thing I was waiting to read was to read Mondli Makanya's write-up in the City Press, because Mondli Makanya has been consistent about the bile that he has for this particular person and individual player in South African politics. To then watch all of the people come up with all of their, he was so divisive, he was so hateful, he was an apartheid puppet. Wow. And none of those fucking people have said anything. They waited till the man
Oh, wow.
died because they're such cowards.
Yeah.
Till the man died because they're such cowards. But also to then watch yesterday at the memorial, Mbuyiseni Ndlozi shouting all of this praise. And I was thinking, such bullshit, actually. All of them. They're all just such bullshitters. And it's interesting to see that this is who South Africans are. And
What the
every
hell
day,
business? Let me just ask you, what business do Floyd Shivambu and Mbuyiseni Ndlozi have with Mangosuthu Buthelezi?
Haibo, it's an election year. You every time there's a
No,
microphone on, when you are you are a politician, when there's a microphone on, when there is a camera with the red light pointed in your direction, you must use that moment. Did you not see Julius Malema in court freaking out in front of all of the cameras about the magistrate being late? And then when the magistrate got there, he was all a lamb.
Yeah.
It's an
Yeah.
election year. The cameras are on, the microphones are on. They've got to give us a show.
All right. Well, I mean, I said on Monday that everybody has to go. Mangosuthu Buthelezi had a good innings. He lived a long time. He got to see many things in his life. Whether he was the villain or the hero